We ended the last video by listing Professor John Kotter's 8 change accelerators, and they were, in order of priority: 1. Creating a sense of urgency; 2. Forming an urgency team; 3. Strategic vision; 4. Volunteer army; 5. Removing barriers; 6. Short-term wins; 7. Sustaining acceleration; and finally 8. Anchoring change. Now let's go through each accelerator in order that we can understand how they can help us to achieve successful change in our organizations. According to Professor Kotter at the Harvard Business School, the first accelerator, creating a sense of urgency, is in fact the most important. And because of this, it's critical above everything else. And you need to first establish a sense of urgency before doing any other change efforts. And this is important because failure during step 1 often means that organizations don't have enough of a sense of urgency to drive the necessary change forward. And based on John's research findings, successful change can only begin when there is a minimum of 51% of all employees who believe in that sense of urgency. And they are engaged and energized around the need for urgency and the need for that change. Well, creating a sense of urgency sounds like an easy thing to achieve, but in fact, it's quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge because 2 critical things must always be kept in mind in order to create a sense of urgency. The first is that urgency must be focused on one single big opportunity. Pay attention to the word opportunity. The word opportunity is used because change should not be built upon fear, like punishment or losing your job. And this is important to remember because fear does not help accelerate the change process. Only a single big opportunity, which 51% of employees understand, does accelerate the process. Another important thing to remember about urgency is that the sense of urgency must be positively defined, articulated, which is a fancy word for clear, highly energizing, and it should represent an aspirational description of the future of the organization. In other words, what will we all want our organization to look like in the future? In addition to those points, people in the organization must wish to contribute towards achieving the opportunity and not just be afraid of what might happen if they don't. And what this means is that a good sense of urgency motivates people to buy into the idea, to buy into the change, and also to achieve that. And the people must understand why they need to act now. The sense of urgency also helps to highlight or make clear the goals of the change plan, and that urgency should also show people how those goals will benefit the whole organization and themselves. So please remember, creating a sense of urgency is the fuel for all the other change accelerators. The second accelerator which John identified is the urgency team. So what does it mean by urgency team? Well, before any change can occur, one needs to build a guiding team, and Kotter refers to this as the coalition, and that coalition should be made up of a group of people who buy in or take personal ownership for the planned change. And they do that in a strong way. And that coalition should involve key people in the organization, but not necessarily just top management. And those key people will be the ambassadors for change. In larger organizations, for example, urgency teams might consist of 30 to 40 people who are then divided into smaller groups. And the urgency team should set a collegial or united way of thinking and collaborative work environment, which becomes infectious out into the organization. The urgency team should also reflect and practice the principle of what we do speaks so loudly that others can hear and understand what we say. Now, I mentioned that top leadership does not necessarily have to be involved or be part of the guiding team, but that does not mean that senior executives of an organization should not be part of the discussion on change. They can be and should be. But the important point is that they are not driving the change process, because the guiding team is doing that. And why is that, you might be wondering? Well, that is because peer-to-peer influence is much more powerful than executive influence. And by peer-to-peer, we mean employee to employee or manager to manager. And this is true because people respect and honor more their peers sometimes than they do top-down orders. And also, please remember that the urgency team's ability to generate urgency at a peer-to-peer level is far greater than any individual senior executive can do in an organization. So now you might be thinking, how do we identify members for the urgency team? Well, Professor Kotter gives some tips on how to do that. The first criteria for members of the urgency team is based on influence. And what this means is that you recruit people to the urgency team who have demonstrated peer-to-peer influence over time in the organization. The second criteria for urgency team membership is respect. And what this means is that you recruit people to the team who are highly regarded and respected by their colleagues and their peers. The third criteria for membership in the team is energy level. And this means that you only recruit people for the team who really have a lot of tenacity or grit and who are recognized by others, or in other words, as Kotter says, they fill up a room with that grit. And finally, and most importantly, you recruit people to the urgency team who don't care about who gets the credit for the success, as opposed to those people who are just ego-driven. And this is very important because successful members of the team must have an abundance mentality. And what abundance mentality means is that they view change as an opportunity to get together and join together to do this. And that abundance mentality is the very opposite of, I'm doing this for my own visibility or personal benefit. Remember that, abundance mentality. But by first clearly defining the urgency team members and the criteria for their membership, it helps in recruiting the best people who will then drive the urgency and help the organization to achieve successful change. In the next video, we'll discuss more the change accelerators.